Let's take a look at the injury report in regards to fantasy football. A couple of quarterbacks which we'll target coming up here in this segment. I guess we should really focus on Chicago. Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson both out. But the most recent news has Herbert put on IR, so the Chicago running back will miss at least the next 4 games. Adding Travis Homer, and the running back position in Chicago is lean, to say the very least. All right, we've got Dave Richard from Fantasy Football today to break down these injuries ahead of Week 6 in the NFL. But let's start with the quarterbacks. And for Deshaun Watson, the late scratch last week prompted DTR conversations, but he's out now, and it's not even Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but P.J. Walker that's going to be suiting up. More initials, but it doesn't make fantasy managers feel good about the situation in Cleveland at all. And tack on weather possibly being an issue for that game, and it really is going to make you want to stay away from everything that has to do with the Browns in this matchup. And let's just start with the quarterback. I mean, you'd have to be desperate in a 2 QB league to go with P.J. Walker. He's got 1 career game with 2 passing touchdowns. He's got 5 career passing touchdowns. He's made 7 starts in the NFL, just 5 touchdowns through the air. He was cut by the Bears this preseason and now ended up in Cleveland to be their quarterback. I am nervous about the impact that he will have on Amari Cooper. I sank Cooper in my rankings. He's barely a wide receiver 3. And Jerome Ford, there's no great track record of running backs doing well with P.J. Walker. And once upon a time, he played with Christian McCaffrey. So this is not a situation where I think Jerome Ford is even a good fantasy running back. We'll talk about some guys who I think will be better than Jerome Ford this week. Yeah, and they're already facing a tough San Francisco defense. Yeah. That matchup is not quite ideal, right?
And no Joel Bitonio. We're ready to drive that Ford right into the garage this week.
I know. If we stick with the quarterback conversation, though, Daniel Jones dealing with a neck injury, what's the outlook there?
You think it's really better for the Giants than it is for the Browns? At least the weather might be okay. Yeah. We'll see what it looks like in Buffalo. And Tyrod Taylor does have a decent track record of playing moderately well. It's just been a few years since we've seen it. So I don't want to trust Tyrod Taylor in fantasy leagues either. But we will talk about Darren Waller and the injury he has. I don't think it's such bad news for him. And Saquon Barkley will talk about the news, the impact that it'll have on him. But obviously you can't use Daniel Jones. I don't think you wanted to use Daniel Jones anyway, even against this Bills defense, which has been beat up by injuries the last couple of weeks.
That Giants O-line has certainly found some trouble, A, staying healthy, B, protecting Daniel Jones and the like. And you mentioned Saquon, so let's get to the running backs, and that's where we'll start, of course, with him dealing with that high ankle sprain all the way back to week 2 against Arizona.
I think the Giants are doing the right thing by letting him take his time to come back, because we've seen running backs, including Saquon Barkley, come back too soon from the injury. He hurts himself again, and then he's out even longer, and then the team says, okay, well, let's really wait. I think it would be smart for the Giants to let him wait again. Why put him in this game that you're probably not going to have much of a chance to win if you've got Tyrod Taylor playing behind a backup offensive line anyway? But fantasy managers might have no choice but to use Saquon Barkley if he's active. So reasons for optimism? Well, number 1, it's Saquon Barkley, and if the Giants think he's healthy enough to play, that means that he's going to get some good opportunities. Number 2, Tyrod Taylor has a career 22% target rate to running backs, so that could be decent for Saquon. He could get maybe 4 or 5 catches in the game. And the Bills, 2nd worst yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs at 5.7. Denver is the worst. But Saquon Barkley, don't let those stats tell you that Saquon's going to have a great game. I think he's at best a number 2 fantasy running back if he suits up. If he doesn't suit up, it's Matt Breida. And yeah, we haven't liked what we've seen from Matt Breida much this year. A couple of decent plays, maybe 10 PPR points.
All right, let's get to the situation in Detroit. They're going to be at Tampa, which is a great matchup, but it continues to be the narrative, at least here through 6 weeks, or 5+, I should say. Yeah. Man, David Montgomery, you got him, feeling good. Jahmyr Gibbs, not so much.
Yeah, and Jahmyr Gibbs not expected to play again, and that's fine. He's somebody that might matter in the second half of the fantasy season, Tommy. Not somebody that can matter now. And if you've got David Montgomery, it doesn't matter that the Bucs' run defense has been good for a long time. It shouldn't matter to you that rookie Kalijah Kancey is going to be back on that defensive line for Tampa Bay. You are starting David Montgomery with the expectations of at least 70 total yards and a tutty.
So I referenced the most topical thing, which is the Chicago backfield, and they're decimated by injury. And Khalil Herbert not only out this week, but of the at least 4-week variety because of IR. So what are the talks now? Roschon Johnson, Travis Homer, and Herbert all out.
And so now it's D'Onta Foreman, going to be the main running back there. And I actually like the situation for him because he's got fresh legs, didn't play a single down the first 5 weeks of the season. He was inactive for Chicago. But I was at Bears camp in June. He was practicing with the starters. He knows these guys. He knows this offense. Maybe a tiny bit of rust to knock off. But we've seen him when he's had a lot of work before. He's come through for fantasy managers, Tommy. Over the last 2 seasons, 13 games with at least 12 carries. He's given you at least 11 fantasy points, non-PPR or full PPR in those games. 9 times he's done it. That's a pretty good average for Foreman. I like him as a number 2 running back. He's my favorite running back off the waiver wire to get. Chuba Hubbard also on that list. He's right behind him. No Miles Sanders expected for Carolina. We know the Panthers are taking on Miami. They're probably going to play from behind. Chuba Hubbard, a good candidate to maybe get as many as 5 catches against the Dolphins.
So quickly, and just to talk about Foreman as a 1-week punt, because if Johnson comes back from concussion, does that change anything for you?
Chicago likes to use multiple running backs. They were doing it with Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson before they both got hurt. Now that we know that there's a 4-week window without Khalil Herbert, we should see Roschon Johnson have a chance to take off, and fantasy managers waited for that. But you will see D'Onta Foreman play alongside him over those next 4 games.
All right, let's get to the pass catchers here. Wide receiver starting with T. Higgins dealing with ribs issues again.
We can't forget about the great game that he had in week 2 with Joe Burrow, but we also can't forget about the terrible games, including the donut and the drops. They were so bad. I don't want to rush back T. Higgins into fantasy lineups. I'm calling him a low-end wide receiver 2. We did see Joe Burrow look good last week, and the Seattle run defense, amazing. Pass rush, I don't think it's quite that good, and I think their secondary does have some holes in it, so there will be some opportunities for T. Higgins to go off. These are the wide receivers that you can find on the waiver wire if you're in a pinch this week, Tommy. We've talked a lot about Josh Downs. His target per route run rate with Gardner Minshew is right up there neck and neck with Michael Pittman's, and he's averaging over 9 yards per catch from Gardner Minshew. An awesome play in DFS, especially those head-to-heads, but certainly a number 3 receiver candidate in full PPR. I also think Samuel and Brandon Powell are good PPR candidates as well. Powell is going to be the slot receiver for Minnesota. We know that they lost Justin Jefferson. He's not going to play, so there's an opportunity there for him to get maybe 10 PPR points if you're really desperate, and he's available basically in every single league.
Okay. I haven't really thought about that. I kind of went chalk and went with Gallup just as a big name in one of my leagues, but I still have some opportunities.
And that's not bad either, because that's expected to be a high-scoring game between the Cowboys and the Chargers.
So we're talking about Mike Evans here. Where are you slotting him as he returns from injury?
I think you go right back to him as a top 15-ish type of fantasy wide receiver. In the matchup against the Lions, look, I think Tampa Bay is going to have a really hard time running the ball. That Lions front is legit, but I don't think they're going to have as much trouble passing it. And we've seen that from Detroit's opponents this season. They've had some good numbers putting the ball up. And Mike Evans, he practiced 2 days this week. We were worried he wasn't even going to be able to practice 1 day. He came through. He's a full go, according to Todd Bowles. I love to hear that. I think you go right back to him, and you expect somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 18 PPR points.
Same game, different position, Lions team. Sam LaPorta has gone off to a fantastic start, by the way. I saw some stat where for him to get 3 touchdowns took him 5 games. Took Kyle Pitts like 32 or something to reach the same, right?
3 seasons, basically.
Yeah, basically. But dealing with that calf issue, though.
And so the number 1 thing with LaPorta, you can still slot him into starting lineups, and if he's active come Sunday, you start him. Don't worry about the calf injury. It's nice that he was able to practice, and according to reports in Detroit, he was practicing without limitations on Friday. That's a great thing. You do want to have a backup plan for Sam LaPorta just in case he is inactive for the game. So number 1, you got to check and make sure that you've got a backup plan. And it could just be somebody that you're eyeballing on the waiver wire at tight end, but just someone out there that you can go and make a move for to replace LaPorta. And then you've got to pay attention on Sunday. Watch Fantasy Football Today. Watch CBS Sports HQ. We'll have the official word right around 11:30 a.m.
And so you're also going to give, obviously, options, because if we go to the Sunday night game with Buffalo and the Giants, there are questions on both sides. Let's start with Buffalo first, with Knox and Kincaid potentially both going to be out.
We should know by Sunday whether or not Dalton Kincaid has passed the concussion protocol. I want him to be healthy and ready to go for the rest of the season, but we also don't want him to play in this game because Dawson Knox is one of the waiver wire candidates. He's a great one to go and target if you're going to have Sam LaPorta and you want to have a backup plan like I talked about. Knox can be that guy, but only if he's the guy. in Buffalo's tight end room. If Kincaid is out, Dawson Knox is somebody who could absolutely step up. Logan Thomas absolutely should be rostered. Jonnu Smith the past couple of weeks, double-digit PPR fantasy points, and someone who's working as a short area target for Desmond Ridder for the time being.
And let's finish with what you referenced was Darren Waller. Even if he's a go, can we trust that Giants offense to give him some opportunities to score points?
I'm going to say that you can, especially in PPR leagues. It's going to be a little bit tougher in half in non-PPR leagues, but because those catches count and because Tyrod Taylor is going to be moving around looking for targets, I think Darren Waller's his guy. Even just last week, Tyrod played in garbage time. A lot of Giants games are garbage time. That's just the way it is this year. 12 throws, 4 of them went to Darren Waller, and he's got a career tight end target rate over 22%. So that's somebody who I think fantasy managers can feel relatively good about starting in PPR leagues.
Okay, Dave, certainly appreciate it. As he mentioned, make sure you stay tuned with Fantasy Football Today. The guys will have you covered right up to the date. What did you guys talk about in the latest pod there?
We did the last 2 days, and this is every Thursday and every Friday, start and sit. And we go through literally every player that matters in fantasy. I'm not going to go through the backup tight end on, Washington or anything like that. But the guys that matter for your fantasy teams, we tell you about them, and we tell you whether or not you can start or sit them. That's on the Fantasy Football Today podcast. Download it anywhere you want or watch it on YouTube.
Love it.